Are you there? Do you hear me? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's go. So I think I have shown you these verb forms, these first ones, by our interruption, by the moment of our interruption for the new year. Anyway, let's talk about the plain form. The plain form, as the present form, is identical with the lexical base. So as you can see, some forms are coincident. Okay, it's identical with the lexical base, but it's not a present tense form. The plain form has nothing to do with the present. It's used in three constructions like this. First one, imperatives, like do it right now. Okay, so the plain form is do, okay, but it is not in the present, it's in the imperative. Another example of the use is the infinitival. Uh, for example, it's better to check the figures oneself, or I will check them myself. It's better to check. This check here is not in the present, it's in the infinitival. You would better understand it if I gave you a sentence like, um, it is important that you study for the exam. This study is not in the present. It's important that you study. This study is in the infinitival form. Or uh, we all know that the conjugation of to be is you are. I am, you are. But when you put in a sentence in the infinitival, uh, we say it's important that you be polite. Okay. So when we use these examples, I hope you understand the difference of the use of the simple present and the infinitive form. Okay. It's important that you be, it's important that you do. It's nice that you do something. It's nice that you stay somewhere. Okay. So it's the infinitive. And finally, the subjunctive, okay? It's essential that she check the figures herself. Sorry, I was talking about the subjunctive, not the infinitival. To do, let's go back here. The subjunctive is this: it's important that you play, it's important that, or it's nice that. Normally, it's started with something like this: it's essential that you play, that you be, that you do. The infinitival is what you use after some auxiliary verbs. Like it's better to check, so it's preceded by the to. Okay, I'm correcting myself here. Do you understand? The three forms of use of the plain form, which is the lexical base of the verb without to, is the imperative, the infinitival sentences that are those in which the verb is normally preceded by to, and the subjunctive. The problem here is that I messed up and gave examples of subjunctive when I was talking about the infinitival, but I hope I could correct on time. So it's essential that she be on time. It's recommended that you be attention. This be is the subjunctive.
It sounds kind of strange, but I can how can I can identificate the that I should use the subjunctive with that sentence, right? It's important that, it's essential that, it's
Mhm.
vital that.
In Portuguese, when we conjugate this subjuntivo, we use some artificial resources to do that. Que eu seja, que tu
Sim,
sejas, que ele seja.
eu pensei nisso também.
Aham.
Como que ficava em português?
Uhum. Mhm, mhm. So this is the subjunctive. Any questions? It's just for you to know the forms and the shapes, okay? Uh, I'm not going into the subjunctive. It's a structure that's not common, or it's not it's common, but it's not recurrent in English. We rarely use it. We use more imperatives for sure and infinitival sentences. But I think you should know that the subjunctive does exist because when you come across sentences in the subjunctive, sometimes we feel somehow strange. Didn't you feel strange when I say it's important that she be?
That's exactly what I said.
Mm-hmm.
I find it strange sometimes.
Yeah, kind of awkward, but well, that's the way it is. It's awkward, but there is a rule behind it justifying. Okay, so the infinitival construction, as I said, is very often marked by to, but it is also found without to after such verbs as can, may, will, do. Okay, as you can see, modal verbs or auxiliary verbs. Okay, like in she didn't check the figures herself, or make. They made me check the figures myself. Okay, so when you make someone do something, okay, it's when you induce, let's say. Okay, so normally it's preceded by to, but not always. Okay, we have cases with can, may, will, and do that to may not appear in the infinitival constructions. Finally, the fifth verb form is the plain form, and it should not be misunderstood by the plain present. Okay, the plain form is also identical with the lexical base, as I said, but is not a present form. So, no, it's the same. I'm sorry, the letter D. It's just an animation problem. Today, I have a lack of attention. Sorry. So, there are two major factors that distinguish the plain form from the plain present. This is important. How to distinguish plain form and plain present. One of them is the case of the verb to be. To be has three present tense forms instead of the usual two, as I said, is, am, and are. So we have three forms. But uh, all of these are different in shape from the plain form be. Okay, so plain present, three shapes. Okay, plain form, one shape, only be. Okay, it is plain present form that appears in the three constructions shown here. Be quiet. It's an imperative. Okay, so be quiet, be cautious, uh, or I don't know, be anything that you use be to give an advice. Okay. Another example. It's better to be safe than sorry. In this case, and in the next one, I will be ready in no time. What we have here is an infinitival use of the verb. Okay. In the first case, with the use of to, it's better to be safe than sorry. And in the second case, without to, because we have will appearing as an auxiliary verb. And we'll be talking about auxiliary verbs by next class. And finally, the subjunctive. It's essential that she be told, of course, we should continue the sentence. It's essential that she be told about the exam, for example. I just got part of the sentence. Okay. So in all cases here, what we have is the plain present. The plain present has to agree in third person singular. Plain form does not take any inflection. Like, she checks the figures herself instead of she check. Or she will check the figures herself instead of she will checks. So what does it mean? The plain present, because it's present, requires agreement. I think there is a mistake here in nomenclature. It's plain, just a moment. No, it's okay. Just the boldface type. I have to correct. Just correcting something in the slide. Okay, so I corrected this because it was saying plain present form. I simplified for plain form without the present, not to make confusion with the plain present. Okay, so next one is the gerund participle, our famous ing. Okay, so traditional grammar will distinguish two forms with this suffix, the gerund and the present participle. Normally, we refer to this verb form as a contributor for the construction of continuous verb tenses. As we know, the suffix ing is not always uh, a verb inflection. What other roles can ing play in a word? Do you recall that? Do you remember the roles that ing can play in a word? Besides being verb
It
inflection?
it can be a noun too. If it can use a noun.
Yeah, yes, it can help form a noun. It can be a derivational suffix. I think it's what you mean. Yeah, it can help us derive words into new words that would be nouns, that become
No,
nouns. Like,
I mean, if the gerund comes at the beginning of the sentence, it can be a noun. Like swimming is something I
mhm,
can do. It's a noun there.
yes, yes, it performs as a subject. That's it. So, and as we know, subjects can only be nouns, either nouns or pronouns. So it's, let's say, nominalized. The word is nominalized by the use of ing. In this case, ing is not verb inflection. In this case, it's derivational noun-forming suffix. Okay. Uh, when we use ing in terms of verb inflection, it always comes attached to a verb in the function of a verb. Okay. This is the difference of calling it derivational noun-forming suffix or calling it a gerund participle suffix. Okay, a gerund, the gerund participle form, not really a suffix, a gerund participle form. The form is comes up by the help of the suffix, but the verb form is something and the suffix is something else. Okay, it could be ing, could be an inflectional suffix in the case of the gerund participle. So, as I said, the grammar will distinguish between gerund and present participle. Like here, walk, as in the example you gave, walking late at night can be dangerous. In this case, what we have is the gerund. Okay, as swimming is good for the health, or motor racing is exciting. Okay, in all these cases, it's the gerund. Okay, when it's performing uh, when it's occupying a position as the topic of the sentence. Okay, as the subject. Hmm. With some, just a moment. Yes, Query.
O can be da frase pode ser, no caso, tá no infinitivo, não é isso? Can
Não.
be dangerous.
Ah, sim. Nesse caso, a frase tá, essa oração ela tá modalizada. A gente vai falar de modalizers no nosso próximo tópico sobre verbos, tá? Can, may, should, ok?
Ok.
São tipos especiais são verbos auxiliares. Na verdade, está incluso no tópico verbos auxiliares. Nesse caso, tá reduzida de infinitivo sim, né? No caso do be, tá? Por quê? Porque aparece o can antes dele. Né? E a gente depois vai tratar da função desse can como modalizador, tá? Que é um outro tópico, nosso último tópico, para ser bem franco, ok? Então, assim, a resposta para você é sim, está no infinitivo. O be está, tá? Mas o nosso foco agora está sendo no uso do verbo to walk, ok? Como ele está transformado em gerúndio, ok? Nesse caso, estou tentando mostrar para vocês a diferença entre o gerúndio e o particípio presente, ok? Veja, no gerúndio, walking é personificado, por assim dizer, é nominalizado. Ele é o próprio agente nessa oração, digamos assim. Enquanto que na segunda, em que ele é particípio presente, nós temos people walking late at night must be careful. So walking is referring back to people. It's restricting the meaning of people. And when it happens, like people studying for the exam must be attention to syntax. So in this case, this verb in ing is helping to restrict the meaning of the subject. It's not the subject. Okay. It's working somehow as an adjective or as a predicative complement. Okay. So this is the difference in calling it the present participle. The structure is ing, but the function here is of subject. And the function here is of a restrictor for the word people. So that's why we group this into the category the gerund participle. It's either one or the other. Okay.
So,
Which,
okay.
yes,
So
yes,
people walking, because you said it as restrictor because it's just the people who are walking late at night, right?
that's it. It's
But
restricting the word people. People, it's a lot of people. Now, when I say people walking late at night, I have a more restrict meaning.
but why
Yes.
wouldn't that be gerund?
Technically, the gerund is when the verb assumes the position of a subject. In present participle, it's when we use it with ing to call it, to make it work as a restrictor. Okay. What I'm trying to argument here is that we are grouping the two forms into a category that Michael Swan calls the gerund participle. Okay, he groups the two functions into only one to call this use of the verb or this verb inflection, this inflectional form, gerund participle, either one function or the other. So when it's the subject, it's the gerund, when it plays the role of the subject. When it's in function of the subject, which is the case of people walking. So it's the present participle because there is an action that people are part of. Okay. The action of walking, people are taking it, are taking part of it. Okay. It's different here. There is no agent. The agent is the verb itself. Do you agree?
Yes.
Here,
I
the action is centered in the verb. Now, here, there is someone performing the action. And when someone is performing the action, this someone is participating in the action. That's why we call it participle. Now, if you look at
didn't know
these, if you look at these two constructions, which one for you is the classical present continuous?
the second one.
The second
No, no, no.
one,
Action. Let me see. Yeah, yeah, the second.
although you may have felt something strange. Although what?
Yes. It sounds kind of strange, but I know that the first is not, as you said, it's a noun. But
Yeah.
right, something I didn't know that you told me that the it will only be gerund when the ing represents a noun.
No, it's the gerund. It's a way
Yeah.
to use the verb. Okay, it's a way to position the verb. When you put the verb in the gerund, you give it a central position in the sentence. Now, the present participle, there is an agent, and in the gerund, there is no agent. The verb itself is the agent. Let's say like this. Yes, somehow it works as a noun. It's not a noun, but it works as if. Okay. Now, what's strange about people walking late at night must be careful. You said that this is the most similar structure to the present continuous, but there seems to be something missing, isn't it? What is it?
Is the verb to be?
Yeah, the auxiliary be, okay, which is implicit. It's not expressed graphically, but we can distinguish that. Like people who are walking late at night. Okay, so if we put a relative pronoun, who, and the verb, the agreement for the verb to be, so people who are walking late at night must be careful. We have the same semantics. Okay, we have the same meaning for the sentence. Okay, so here in this square, Mateus, is the answer for your question. A gerund is comparable to a noun, while a participle is comparable to an adjective. There is, however, no verb in English that has distinct forms for the constructions above. And so we have a single form, and the name gerund participle indicates that it covers both traditional categories. So you are right, okay, in your observation when you say the gerund is more as a noun, and the participle, it's when it's inflected, normally with to be before it. Yes, okay. If you look at walking late at night, or simply people walking, I can consider that walking is restricting the meaning of people, not all the people, but just those who are walking. Okay, so it seems to operate as either an adjective or a predicative complement. Okay, restricting the meaning of the subject. Let me see the chat.
It was me. So the reason I was getting confused it was because I was comparing to the gerúndio in Portuguese, so it's different, right? Gerund is different for gerúndio.
What do you understand by gerúndio in Portuguese?
Eu entendo como uma ação que está sendo feita agora. Aí tem a terminação com ND ou A, alguma coisa do tipo.
Uhum. O que se chama gerúndio em português, pelo que você está me passando de entendimento, que faz sentido, é o nosso ando, endo, indo, né, que é o ing do inglês.
Isso
A
mesmo, isso
diferença
mesmo.
é de nomenclatura, tá? A língua inglesa vai chamar de participe presente, tá? Então, e na verdade, deixa o nome gerúndio que o português não faz essa distinção? Porque a gente não tem estruturas, por exemplo, em que o gerúndio é usado como forma de subjetivar um verbo. Por exemplo, escutando música faz bem à saúde. Isso não existe em português. Mas em inglês, listening to music is good for mental health. That's perfect. Ok? Então, como o português não tem essa estrutura, a língua inglesa distingue em duas nomenclaturas de função. E ela deixa gerúndio para essa função, em que o verbo ganha esse ing para se tornar quase que um substantivo, como a gente fala das 4 habilidades da língua inglesa, listening, speaking, writing, etc. Né? E ganha uma outra nomenclatura, essa do ando, endo, indo, que é o gerúndio em português, o inglês chama de particípio presente. Fica claro?
Era essa a minha dúvida. Obrigado.
Isso. A gente pode chamar tudo de gerúndio. Na verdade, há um desacordo entre os gramáticos de chamar tudo de gerúndio, por exemplo. O Michael Swan, ele aborda 2 formas. Ele fala em gerúndio, para esse caso em que se assemelha, o verbo se assemelha à função de um substantivo. E particípio presente, para esse outro caso em que o verbo se assemelha muito mais a um restritor de sentidos do sujeito que o pratica. Ou seja, se há um sujeito que o pratica, há uma participação na ação, particípio presente. Ficou mais claro agora?
Ficou.
É uma questão de nomenclatura, não é uma questão de função. O inglês tem uma função a mais que o português e por isso também carece de uma nomenclatura a mais. Right?
Professor, você pode só repetir a explicação? Ele se assemelha do present participle.
Vamos lá de novo. Quando eu pego walking late at night can be dangerous. This, in the approach of Michael Swan, which is the one I'm adopting here, is a gerund. Gerund, in the yellow square here, a gerund is comparable to a noun. It is a verb used as if it were a noun. The second case, people walking late at night must be careful. Now, when you look at the use of walking here, walking is restricting the meaning of people. Not every people, but those people walking late at night. In this case, the participle is comparable to an adjective. Okay? So it's just a difference in naming the function of gerund and the function of participle. This is the traditional approach. Okay? Now, to solve this, Michael Swan prefers to group the 2 forms and call it just gerund participle, because it's always either one or the other. O que o Swan faz na gramática dele, Practical English Usage, é juntar a categoria gerund e a categoria participle, criar só uma gerund participle. Na verdade, é uma tentativa de se aproximar das outras gramáticas, sobretudo as latinas, do português, do espanhol. Tá? É uma tentativa de agrupar essa nomenclatura e dar uma mesma abordagem para as 2 formas de terminação ing do verbo. Ficou mais claro agora, Claire?
Sim, professor. Obrigada.
Ok. Gerund participle is not easy, really. And finally, the past participle, which is familiar to you in the use of the perfect verb tenses. Okay? So it's used in 2 main constructions. The perfect, all the perfect verb tenses, and the passive voice. The perfect, she has checked the figures, and the passive, the figures must be checked by the boss. So let's see. The perfect is a past tense marked by the auxiliary verb have. We all know that when we construct a perfect verb tense, we use have as an auxiliary and the past participle form of the verb in the place of the main verb. While the most straightforward cases of the passive involve the auxiliary be. So when I have, as a rule of thumb, when I have be as an auxiliary, what I have is a passive voice. When I use have as an auxiliary, what I have is a perfect verb tense. So we retain the traditional term past participle, though the past component of meaning applies just to the perfect construction. This is due to the fact that most dictionaries and grammar books still refer to this form like that. Okay, so in fact, it's uh, a, this past participle form is somehow called present perfect, like here, the perfect. She has checked. Why present? Because it's the present of the auxiliary verb. If you look at to have here, it's using a present form. And ed in the main verb is the participle, okay? It's the past participle, okay? So we call it present perfect, present of have, perfect of the main verb. I call perfect for didactical reasons, but the correct name is past participle, okay? Past participle. But we normally call it perfect to simplify for students to understand, to manipulate these verb tenses, okay? So these are the 6 inflectional verb forms. If we review that, we have seen the preterite, finally D, third singular present, the S after he, she, it, the plain present, which is similar to the verb base, but used in simple present tense, the plain form, which is used in constructions like imperatives, for instance, the gerund participle, which is the final ing, mostly used in continuous verb tenses, but also used as the subject of the sentence, and the past participle, which is common in present perfect constructions, future perfect constructions, and so on. So what is important here for you to know is that if we combine all these verb forms, we may result in all possible verb tenses in English. Okay? Any questions about this? So if I asked you, what's the difference between verb form and verb shape? How would you tell me this difference? What does verb form refer to and what does verb shape refer to? Remember that form has to do with function.
Hmm.
With,
Verb form. Okay.
yes, Mateus, go on.
I would say that verb shape is the way the verb is, the without any sentence, just the form of the shape of the verb, and the verb tense would be it up how can I say, aplicado no, não seria applied, né? In a sentence, the
Applied,
verb
yeah.
in a sentence, apply in a sentence with a function.
Yeah, in fact, verb form is referent to function in a sentence. The verb shape has to do with spelling. For example, we have the form plain present. We have the present form, but we have 3 shapes for the verb to be: is, am, and are. Okay, so verb shape is more to spelling, whereas form is closer to the notion of time, verb tense. Okay, this is the difference. Verb form will help us build up all the verb tenses. It's based on the 6 verb forms that we can create all the possible verb tenses in English. Now, these verb forms can be disassembled, let's put it this way, into normally 2 different shapes. One shape for he, she, it, and another shape for the other persons, the other pronouns. Do you get now the difference between form and shape? Form involves a notion of verb tense, the process of building verb tenses. Okay, so verb shape, you are right when you say it's related to the application in a sentence because it will have to agree. Okay, so the verb shape is referring to the agreement, okay, with the subject, right?
Isn't it the opposite? The verb form.
Let's see here. Just a moment.
You said the verb shape. Isn't the opposite?
Let's go back to the slide that talk about verb shape.
I thought shape was related to the spelling, as you said first.
No, that's what I said. Yes, the shape is related to the spelling, and the form is
Yeah,
related
but
to the function.
you said that the shape was related to the function.
No.
You
Sorry, to
just
the
said that.
application.
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
yeah,
I may have said
you
that.
just,
I may have got confused and
yes,
said that, but it's
yes.
related. So let's go back. Form is the function. It's how I create verb tenses. To create verb tenses, I have to combine verb forms. Now, these verb forms have at least two verb shapes, one for he, she, it, and another one for the other pronouns. Okay, so verb shape is related to spelling. Okay, but this is a kind of gross approximation. Okay, verb shape is related to the real way that we arrange the verbs and we put the verb form into existence by agreeing the verb with the subject. Okay, verb shape is spelling. Okay, and verb form is more related to the notion of verb tense and how I build them. Okay, is it clear now?
We could also say that verb shapes are the verb isolated, just the verb, right?
No, the verb isolate, just the verb would be the plain form. What you mean is that infinitive without to, is it?
Yes.
It's one of the possible forms. This is the plain form. Okay, like
Okay.
the verb to be, the be is the plain form. Okay, that we use in
No,
imperatives.
I'm the verb isolated, the way it's written and that stuff.
Yes, could be like that. Verb form is a notion that it's the primitive, it's the previous element before we consider verb tense. There would be no verb tense if there would not be verb forms. Okay, verb tenses are a resultant of the combination of the 6 verb forms. This is the best way to think of verb forms. Verb forms are the most basic uh, notions concerning verb tense. Okay, we build verb tenses out of verb forms. For example, she has gone to London. Well, has is the plain present of the verb to have, and gone is the participle of the verb to go. So the plain present and the participle are verb forms. I combine two verb forms and now I have a verb tense. Okay? So verb forms are the raw material for verb tenses. Is it clear now? They are the constituent elements of verb tenses. Is it better understandable now? Tudo bem, Matheus? Vamos lá, vamos
Yeah,
recapitular.
it's alright. It's alright.
Isso, eu tenho os verb forms. Eles são os elementos básicos para a construção dos verb tenses. Não haveria verb tense sem verb form. O que é o verb form? São as suas aplicações mais rudimentares em termos de tempo verbal ou função na frase, como no caso do gerúndio, a decisão entre gerúndio e particípio presente. Né? A combinação dos verb forms vai gerar os mais variados verb tenses, do mais simples, como o simple present, né? Que coincide de ser verb form e verb tense, aos tempos verbais ditos complexos ou compostos, como present perfect, future perfect continuous e por aí vai, ok? No future perfect continuous, eu vou usar várias verb forms combinadas para formar um verb tense, ok? So the next topic, which I consider to be a little easier than verb forms, is the auxiliary verbs, okay? So auxiliary verbs, uh, they differ in behavior from lexical verbs. Well, first of all, we have to make a distinction. What does the word lexical indicate to you? When we talk about lexical verb, what do you understand? How would you define a lexical verb? The teachers here. Haven't a student ever asked you what's the translation for do in the sentence, I don't like coffee? Teacher, what does this do mean? And what do you have to answer? Or how do you answer
Uh,
this well?
it has to do with the vocabulary, with the meaning.
Yeah,
It's
in
the
fact,
lexical.
yeah, yes, yes. Lexical verbs are those verbs that you can give a meaning. Now, it's not the case of do. Do is an auxiliary verb. It's playing a grammar role there. And if we were to transpose it to another language, like Portuguese, this do simply disappears in the structure of the new language that you are translating into. So, uh, lexical verbs are those verbs that you can grasp a mental image of what they mean. And auxiliary verbs,
But
yes, yes, Mateus.
I can say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but you can grasp a meaning for can, may, those verbs. Okay, I can do that
Yeah,
for do,
we'll be
but I
treating
can
we'll
for can
uh-huh. Mm-hmm. We'll be
and for
treating,
may.
yes, we'll be treating about those modal verbs as well. Okay. The meanings of can, may, should, they are the modal meanings. Okay. The modalizers. We are going to talk about the modalizers in a specific section. But basically, what we are trying to do here is distinguishing auxiliary verbs from lexical verbs. And those lexical verbs are those that we normally call the main verb of the sentence. I think this is the best definition. I'm trying to conduct you from a more raw and basic notion of meaning, verb meaning, and bring you to this more elaborate one, which is the one that you are bringing now. Yes, for sure. May, should, ought to, they all have a meaning, okay? But they do not occupy the position of the main verb. That's the point. So it's a matter of meaning, but also a matter of positioning. Okay. So we have auxiliary verbs, and they are subdivided into two other groups: the modals, as you can see here, can, may, must, will, and so on, and the non modals, be, have, and do. Okay. And the usage, okay, the two most frequent situations of usage involve the subject auxiliary inversion and the negatives. Okay, so how do we distinguish an auxiliary verb? How do you know a verb is the auxiliary and not the main verb? What's the technique that you use to identify auxiliary verbs?
Well, I can see if it's the main part of the sentence, and also I can turn it into a question and see if we'll change the position, his position.
That's a point. As I said, it's part meaning and part position. And when you turn the sentence into a question or into a negative, you can realize which one is the auxiliary and which one is the main verb, because the auxiliary will always do the hard work. of being inverted or receiving a not after it. Okay. So the first case, subject auxiliary inversion. We have seen that in canonical clauses, the subject precedes the verb, whereas in interrogative main clauses, the subject follows the first verb. The verb that precedes the subject, however, must be an auxiliary verb. Only auxiliaries can invert with the subject. So this is the first step to identify an auxiliary verb. Take a look in these examples here. She has taken the car. And the inversion, has she taken the car? So have is an auxiliary in this construction, because when we build the question, when we turn the affirmative, the positive sentence into an interrogative sentence, what we have is the inversion between the verb to have and the pronoun she. Okay. And if I take here, she took the car, I have the ungrammatical form here, took she the car. That does not do, of course, okay? That's why I'm representing it with an asterisk to mean it's ungrammatical. What would be the correct form?
She taken the
We
car.
all know. Yeah, did she take the car? So
Oh,
as you can
did yeah.
see, the auxiliary did is not present in the declarative version, but it's somehow hidden in it, and it will only appear when we turn it into a question. This is the point. If the declarative does not contain an auxiliary, as in B, she took the car, it is necessary to insert the auxiliary do so that inversion can apply. It's not the main verb that will invert, but the auxiliary that will appear. It will be somehow revealed. Let's consider it was hidden in the declarative sentence, and it only appears when we have the negative or the interrogative. So, did she take the car? As you already know, this do has no meaning. I mean, no semantic meaning. It is simply inserted to satisfy the grammatical rule requiring an auxiliary. Okay, so that the verb to take will remain untouched. Okay, in its plain form. Easy, isn't it? So how do you find the auxiliary? Step one, turn it into a question or turn it into a negative, which is the next step. In negatives, the construction where not is used to negate the verb likewise requires that the verb be an auxiliary. Okay, so not will only appear after auxiliary verbs. As here, she has taken the car versus she has not taken the car. So not will always follow the auxiliary verb. Or the ungrammatical case, she took the car, which is positive. She took not the car is the ungrammatical form. What would be the grammatical form?
She did not take the car.
Again, we have to make did appear as the auxiliary. It is hidden. Let's use this image of a hidden verb in the declarative sentence that appears when uh, we manipulate the sentence to make it either interrogative or negative. So again, if there is no auxiliary in the positive, do must be inserted to form the negative. She did not take the car. Auxiliaries, but not lexical verbs, have negative forms ending in the suffix not or in the contraction and apostrophe t, okay, which can be used as a suffix, okay. In fact, it's a contraction, but it can appear under the form of a suffix or take a not after them. okay, which is the same. I'd better say with a more simple language that only auxiliaries take not. If you look at all the verbs in the English language, you will realize that only auxiliary verbs, including the modals, would take a not. Okay. So we have also the non-modal auxiliaries, be, have, and do, that we are talking about. And later on, we talk about the modals. Let's treat these three non-modal ones. Do is used in constructions like subject, auxiliary inversion, and negatives when required to satisfy a need for an auxiliary. There is also a lexical verb do. We all know that. Like, I'm doing my homework. This do is lexical, okay? So there is always a lexical verb do used in clauses like she did her best or I did him an injustice, etc. Here, then, auxiliary do must be added to form the interrogatives and negatives. So we have two do's. Did, which is do in the past. Did she do her best? Or I didn't do him an injustice. So, as you can see, we have two occurrences of do in each sentence. One, the first one in the question here being the auxiliary form of do, and the second one as a main verb. In I didn't do him an injustice, the same thing happens. I have did in the past as an auxiliary, and I have do in the plain form as, in the plain present, sorry, as the main verb of the sentence. So be has three uses, okay, that can be distinguished and illustrated in these examples. Be can be a progressive marker, like in they are watching TV. Why progressive? Another way of calling the present continuous is calling it a progressive verb tense or present progressive. Why progressive? Why do you think it's called a progressive
Because
verb tense?
the action is in progress. Because the action is in progress.
Perfect. Perfect. We have an action in progress, so it's a progressive verb tense. Now, progressive verb tenses need something to prepare this gerund participle verb form, which is exactly be, okay, in its uh, in its present form, are. They are watching. So we call it a progressive marker. Or here in be, I've been working all morning. Also here, there is a progression. I've been working, something that has started in the past and is still in progress, okay? And here, the participle of be is used as a progressive marker. So this is one of the uses of be as an auxiliary. Be can also be used as a passive marker. If you take these two examples here, it was taken by Jill, okay? So be is used in its preterite form to prepare the next verb in the participle, in the past participle, taken, or the past participle of to arrest. He may be arrested. Here we have the plain form be preparing the passive voice of the next verb. Okay, that's why we say it's a passive marker. And we have the case of copula, in which both of them happens, like she was a friend of his, and that is very likely to happen. The case of copula is when we have be either as a lexical verb indicating a state of being, okay, and as the auxiliary, because when we build the question, when we invert and create the question, be is the auxiliary of itself. Let's say like this. So it's playing both roles, auxiliary and main verb. Okay. She was a friend of his. There is no other verb here except be. There is no other verb here except be. In that is very likely. But also, the inversion for the question is, was she a friend of his? So it's also, let's say, like being the auxiliary
So B is the
of
main verb,
itself.
right?
Sorry, can you repeat
I
that?
was saying that in this case, B is the main verb, right?
And also, it's its own auxiliary. It's the only verb.
Okay.
So it is inverted. And then because of it, we can say it's the auxiliary, but it's the only verb. And we say it's the main verb. That's why we call it copula, because it merges the two functions in only one. Okay? Is it understood what copula is?
Yeah,
When the
I
verb
was. Yes.
when the verb is both auxiliary and main verb. Okay, so let's take the case of the progressive marker. In one here, where be is followed by a verb in the gerund participle form, it is a marker of progressive aspect. It generally serves to indicate that the situation, the action, the event, the state, or whatever was, is, or will be in progress at a time in question. Okay, as you can see, we can use different verb forms. Was, which is the preterite, is, which is the present form, or will be. In fact, will be, we do not have, if you paid attention to the previous section, you may have found it strange that we do not have a future form. Did you realize that? We talked about the preterite, we talked about the gerund, the participle, the plain present, plain form, but we haven't mentioned the future. Did you realize that? That English, technically speaking, has no future at all? Future in English is indicated by two constructions. Will, which originally can be used as well as a noun, a will, an inclination to do something, a will to do something, or to be plus going to, which is the combination of the plain form plus a gerund participle. Okay, that's why we didn't mention any future verb form. Okay, the future in English is a resultant of other verb forms. Okay, the future in English is a kind of compound verb tense. Have you ever wondered about that? That English has no future? I mean, in terms of verb form. So in this case, going back here as a progressive marker, we choose a verb form for be, and it precedes the gerund participle, okay, to indicate that the action is, was, or will be in progress. Now, as a passive marker, the clauses in two are passive. It was taken or he may be arrested, okay? And 2a here is the passive counterpart of Jill took it. Jill took the message, for example. The message was taken by Jill. Okay, so it's the passive voice. As we know, passives are non-canonical. So if we were to analyze syntactic functions, we would have to turn it into a canonical version that would be Jill took the message. Jill took it. Okay, the presence of be being one of the major differences between the two forms, okay? When I turn it into passive voice, then be appears. Jill took the message. There is no be in this. Jill took it. We do not see any verb to be. Now, when I put it in the passive, the message was taken by Jill. And now we have was, which is the preterite of be. Okay. But there is no active counterpart possible for he may be arrested, because the later has no phrase. Okay, it's impossible to say he arrested him. Okay, arrest, the verb to arrest is always used in the past, in the passive voice. Okay, he has been arrested or he may be arrested. Okay, so be is always required in passive voices as a passive marker. Okay, so these are the uses of be as passive marker. And in the case of copula, okay, she was a friend of his, or that is very likely to happen. Okay, uh, be is the only verb in this case, in both cases, but it still behaves as an auxiliary. Thus, the interrogative is, was she a friend of his? And the negative of be is, that is not very likely to happen. So we call copula because the verb merges both functions, auxiliary and main. Okay, so this is a case of copula in terms of being both an auxiliary, because it can be inverted, uh, it can receive a not, and main verb because it's the only one. Okay, basically it's what we discussed briefly in the first slide. I'm just going through each characteristic. Okay, finally, have. This verb belongs as well to both lexical and auxiliary verbs. Have can be used as a lexical verb to indicate that you own something. Okay, I have a dog, I have a car, so on. Okay, but it can also be used as an auxiliary verb. Okay, as in she had a swim. In this case, in she had a swim, it is a lexical verb. How do I know that? I know that because the interrogative and negative counterparts of she had a swim are, did she have a swim? And negative is, she didn't have a swim. So have is preserved. Okay, and in this case it's not indicating uh, owning something or having anything as a possession, but taking part of an action. Okay, but have remains unchanged in the sentence. And what I have in the constructions of the interrogative and negative is the appearance of did as an auxiliary. But we can see have operating as an auxiliary verb as well. Let's take it here as a perfect marker. Like, he has broken his leg, or he may have taken it yesterday. So in this case, what would be the possible constructions for interrogatives and negatives? Okay, we have the perfect marker here. Has he broken his leg? In the first example, A, has he broken his leg, would be the interrogative. So in this case, have is an auxiliary with the function of perfect marker. It prepares a perfect verb tense. The same happens in B. He may have taken it yesterday. Okay. In this case, we have to invert may. Okay. But have is still preparing another verb in the participle, which is the verb to take in the participle. So it's still operating as a perfect marker. It's preparing the perfect. It's serving the function of anticipating the verb in the past in the participle. Okay, the same way here, has broken. Okay, we also have the static have, as she has enough credit, or we have to invite them all. In all these cases, have is a static verb that indicates a state of being, like having credit, she has enough credit, or we have to invite them all, which this have expresses something that is recommended to do. As a perfect marker, as I said, the perfect is marked by auxiliary have plus a past participle. So it's best regarded as a secondary past tense. What do we say second? Why do we say secondary past tense? The primary past tense is the inflectional preterite. He broke his leg. When I say he has broken his leg, what I have is a secondary past tense, a kind of past tense that has happened in the past with some present influence or some kind of unfinished past, okay? An unfinished past. Note, for example, that the preterite is found only in finite constructions, such as he took it yesterday. So it can't occur after May. Okay, finite constructions, finished past actions, actions that were that happened in the past and they are finished. That's why I call it finite constructions. Now, the preterite does not happen after May. Let's see why. Because may takes an infinitival clause as complement, always. Not only may, but the modal verbs. When we use any modal verb, we have to have an infinitival clause following it. That's why the perfect have is used instead here in to be. He may have taken it yesterday because may, although both here may and have are auxiliary verbs, have is a perfect marker and should stick to the next verb in the participle, and may will play the role of being inverted and receiving not. Então, o que acontece aqui é que um dos nossos macetes agora cai. Ele funciona bem em muitos casos, mas não em todos. Eu não posso dizer que have aqui não é um verbo auxiliar só pelo fato dele não se inverter na pergunta. A forma interrogativa da oração B, todos sabemos que seria May he have taken it yesterday? Então, o may seria o único auxiliar? Não. O have, apesar de permanecer na versão interrogativa com a posição inalterada, ele continua servindo ao propósito de preparar a chegada de um verbo no particípio. A dica é boa, mas a dica não vai funcionar em 100% dos casos. Não é porque não recebeu not e não foi invertido que não é auxiliar. Porque em alguns casos, orações têm dois verbos auxiliares, como é o caso dessa. Is it clear? Tá tranquilo, gente?
Tá.
Yeah.
Ok. Então, o have, ele tem dois usos. Só para recapitular. Ele pode ser léxico e ele pode ser auxiliar, tá? Esse have, ele pode ser um perfect marker, voltando aqui, ou ele pode ser um have estático, que indica uma obrigação, um dever moral, ok? Tem duas funções também. E o que nós estamos vendo agora é como ele é usado como perfect marker. Aqui, no primeiro caso, de um modo mais simples, né, onde só ele aparece, portanto, ele é o invertido na questão, e na oração B, de um modo mais complexo, aparecendo junto a um verbo modal. E por aparecer junto a um verbo modal, todo modal pede um infinitivo, um verbo seguinte no infinitivo. É o que acontece com have. E por ter aqui um verbo modal que aparece antes, o verbo auxiliar que é invertido é sempre o primeiro, de primeira ocorrência. No caso, o modal may. Então, quando eu crio a pergunta, eu tenho may he have taken. E aí nos daria a impressão, então have não é auxiliar? É, apesar de não ter sido invertido, porque nós temos dois auxiliares. Um vai fazer o trabalho de inversão e negação, mas o outro vai seguir ao lado do verbo seguinte, que vem no particípio passado, e prepara a chegada desse verbo. Ele serve a outro verbo, por isso ele é auxiliar. Okay? Okay. So, since have itself can inflect for tense, it's doubly marked for tense. It is past with present. The past being marked by the lexeme have, and the present by the inflection on it. Uh, Vamos lá. Since have itself can inflect for tense, ou seja, have tem sua forma had. 1A, here, he has broken his leg, is doubly marked for tense. Então é duplamente marcado no tempo. It is past with present. É uma definição do present perfect. É um passado com presente. Como que a gente lê isso? Past with present. É um passado com consequência presente. É uma das aplicações para usarmos o present perfect ao invés do pretérito simples, né? do preterite. Passado com implicação presente. The past being marked by the lexeme. The past being marked by the lexeme have, and the present by the inflection on it, ok? O presente se marca pelo fato de algo ter acontecido, né? Então você usa o have, ele marca que há uma consequência presente. O uso de have por si só implica no uso de um present perfect, implica que há uma consequência presente, tá? E a ideia de passado e a ideia de presente pela sua inflexão no próprio presente. Ele não está no passado. Quem está no passado aqui, na verdade, um particípio passado, é o verbo to break. What's the consequence? He has broken his leg, so there are lots of consequences for him. He cannot play football, for instance. Ok? A diferença de uso que nós damos no present perfect, a maioria de vocês aprendeu, é ou quando a ação passada tem consequência presente, ou quando essa ação ocorreu é menos importante do que o fato de ela ter ocorrido. Né? This reflects the fact that while the event of his breaking his leg is located in past time, it is seen as having relevance to the present. The most likely scenario is that his leg has not yet healed, so that he is at present incapacitated. That's the idea of how to use present perfect. Okay. The present tense component also explains why it's not normally possible to add an adjunct like yesterday. He has broken his leg yesterday. It's ungrammatical. It's a contradiction. Why? Because when it happened is not the focus of the sentence. The focus of the sentence is what happened and the present consequences. So when we use present perfect, most books, especially textbooks, tell us that action is what really matters, not when it happened. Okay? So this is the practical use of present perfect. Do you have any questions? Any questions, class?
No.
Next class, we'll be dealing with the static have, okay, and finish the topic on auxiliary verbs. It must be our last, I hope so, our last theoretical class on verbs, okay? And then we go to practice syntactical analysis, and we are going to focus on identifying the syntactic elements in a sentence, okay? Preparing you, looking forward, an examination, a kind of, I don't think I'm going to give you a traditional test, but a kind of work to do with some time allotted so that you can answer some questions and send me them, okay?
Like the first exam.
Yes, yes. You can
Uh,
do it like with some
By the
time.
way, when
Yes,
you
Matheus.
will correct it?
Oh,
When
oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You'll be seeing the grades in no time. I'm just finishing up something here, okay? And you'll be seeing the grades. Maybe by next class you'll have the grades, okay?
okay,
I just want to put the grades when I have all of them, okay?
teacher,
Yes.
just a thing. Will we have more two exams or just one?
Just one. Just one. We do not have time for more two. What I'm going to do is to just repeat your average as a third grade because SIGA requires a third grade. But I'm going to repeat it as the average. Okay, so you have 2 grades plus the average, which is the same average. Uma operação matemática simples só para preservar a nota. Ok? You are going to have 2 grades. Okay?
Okay, teacher, thank you.
Okay, so see you next class. Okay, by next class, I bring you your grades. You'll probably be notified by SIGA as soon as I put the grades there. Okay?
All right.
Okay, so see you
Well,
next class.
have a nice day. See you next class.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry for the disturbance here. I'm facing some difficulties today.
No
No
problem.
problem, teacher.
Okay,
Bye bye.
bye.
Professor,
Sim,
posso só tirar uma dúvida aqui com o senhor
pode,
rapidão?
Ana, claro.
Eu sei que a gente ainda está no terceiro período, né? Mas eu estava pensando já no tema para o TCC, e aí o senhor é dessa área de... O senhor deu para a gente, né, panorama histórico da cultura inglesa,
Sim.
e eu estava pensando em relacionar a Segunda Guerra, a influência da Segunda Guerra Mundial na escrita da Agatha Christie e do C.S. Lewis, que são dois autores ingleses, né? Aí eu queria saber se o senhor podia me explicar
É,
como funciona
você está indo mais para o campo da literatura, né?
isso.
O que eu poderia indicar para você,
Uhum,
talvez, assim, como eu fico muito no campo da análise do discurso, talvez eu pudesse indicar para você o contato da professora Maria Araci Bonfim. A Araci,
uhum,
ela é a pessoa da literatura, assim como a professora Nayara, mas eu acho que Nayara está afastada para o pós-doc.
sim.
Araci é um nome excepcional e com certeza vai te orientar melhor na parte literária. Na parte do conhecimento histórico e cultural do pós-guerra, eu poderia orientar, eu poderia fazer, sei lá, às vezes de um co-orientador, mas se o
Uhum.
trabalho pende mais para o campo do literário, assim, eu fico um pouco à vontade de invadir praia de colegas que são melhor preparados que eu para falar desses assuntos, né?
Ah,
Não
entendi.
é que eu estou rejeitando, né, te orientar, mas se
Não,
você
tudo
conseguir
bem.
puxar mais para o campo da análise do discurso, análise das condições históricas de produção e tal, aí daria para fazer um trabalho em análise de discurso.
Uhum.
Pelo que eu percebo, é um trabalho mais de literatura mesmo. Aí eu te indico a professora Maria Araci Bonfim.
Ah, tá bom, então. Obrigada,
O
professor.
Cigarra deve ter o e-mail dela, eu não tenho aqui de cor, mas deve ter o e-mail dela no
Acho que
seu.
ela vai ser nossa professora no próximo período, se eu não me engano.
Perfeito, vocês vão adorar. Vocês vão adorar, tá bom?
Tá bom. Obrigada, professor. Boa
Tá, joia,
tarde.
de nada. Tchau, tchau.
Tchau.